Welcome to the Movie Matchup, the channel where we put two movies head to head to see which is the better film. Today's matchup is between two horror films set in the 1970s as the Blackphone takes on Longlegs. Both films featuring serial killers who target children, and both feature a supernatural element. They were also both written by the sons of horror legends, so let's find out which of these princes of horror brought more screams to the screen. Will the Blackphone lay the whooping on the competition? Or will Longlegs have us screaming for our daddies and mommies?
Daddy! Mommy!
Find out next on this movie matchup. We'll start by breaking these horror movies down into rounds or categories based on the type of film. For these serial killer horror films, our categories will be Round 1, Protagonist. In Round 2, our Princes of Horror will go head to head, as Round 2 will be the story or plot. Round 3 will be which film is scarier, or our scare factor. Round 4 will be our cinematography. And Round 5, the music and score. Round 6, our two serial killers will go head to head, as Longlegs will take on the Grabber. And every movie is only as good as its dramatic conclusion, so Round 7 will be our ending. So get ready to follow the clues and practice your taekwondo. It's time for the matchup. Round 1, Protagonist. So our heroes in these movies are both battling against some crazy psychopath serial killers, but also seem to have somewhat of an advantage since they both have some psychic abilities. In the Blackphone, our hero is Finney Blake, played by masonthames. Finney's a 13-year-old boy with an arm like Randy Johnson. He lives with his sister Gwen, but they don't have your typical brother and sister relationship. They actually get along. This could be because they act like more of a father and mother to their abusive alcoholic father.
I'm staying over at Susie's tonight. It's Friday, so you know what that means.
I'll look after Dad.
Finney is shy and keeps to himself. Unfortunately for Finney, the other kids in Finney's school don't keep to themselves. And they aren't the only ones, as a local serial killer named the Grabber who has been scooping up the neighborhood children, and it doesn't take long for Finney to be the Grabber's latest victim. Now he's trapped in the Grabber's basement and has to find a way out before he ends up on the Blackphone call's waiting list. Finney is not your typical victim. He appears to have some sort of psychic ability he can manifest through the phone in the Grabber's basement. The movie doesn't come right out and tell you this, it gives you subtle clues like Finney's mother and sister being psychic, telling you that this gift is probably genetic. This psychic ability allows him to speak to the dead victims of the Grabber. However, this ability isn't what defines the character of Finney, nor what makes him a formidable opponent to the Grabber. Finney's true strength is that he's tough, and he never gives up. This is shown heavily through the beginning of the film, whether he's being physically abused by his alcoholic father or getting the crap kicked out of him by the school bullies. Finney keeps getting up. Even when captured by the Grabber, Finney doesn't quit. Every victim gives him a new idea or method for escape, and even when each one fails, he doesn't stop trying. It's not until the end of the movie that Finney finally breaks down. Now, while the first half hour of the movie shows us that Finney is strong and hard to break, it also shows us his weakness, which is that Finney does not fight back. This is something that his friend Robin tells him about in the beginning and at the end of the movie.
You're gonna have to stand up for yourself one of these days.
I don't know.
Which leads to the great character development of Finney. He goes from a shy kid who doesn't fight back to a strong 13-year-old who takes on the Grabber himself at the end of the film. masonthames does a great job of making us sympathize with the character. The scene of Finney crying and also holding back his anger as his father wails on his sister with the belt is some great acting for someone as young as he is. He does a good job of making Finney a likable character, and one we root for. Now in Longlegs, our main character is Detective Lee Harker, played by Maika Monroe. She's a new FBI agent who is tasked with solving a string of family killings where the children whose birthdays fall on the 14th of a month are being murdered by their fathers, and someone or something is making them do it. Now Lee is given the task because just like our hero in the Blackphone, she appears to have some sort of psychic ability, or half psychic?
You beat that numbers generator 8 times. How'd you do that?
I also missed it 8 times.
Half psychic is better than not psychic at all, I'd say.
This is discovered early in the film when she finds a serial killer just by having a feeling. Now she has to use her skills to find the elusive Longlegs. The character of Lee Harker is a bit strange. She appears distant and closed off, even living in a cabin in the middle of nowhere. And Maika Monroe's performance really adds to this, as she comes off almost wooden and unemotional, rarely making eye contact. Even her relationship with her mom seems strange and distant, with Lee's mom constantly asking if she still says her prayers.
The honest truth about something. I'll try. Do you still say your prayers?
If you were wondering where Lee got her strangeness from, look no further.
I bled. Mom?
However, what Detective Harker lacks in social skills, she makes up in her detective skills, as she is very quickly able to decipher the notes left by Longlegs.
How'd you figure that out?
I only looked long enough, sir.
Even figures out the pattern of the murders, creating an inverted triangle, which she connects to Satanism. And although a new FBI agent, she doesn't seem overly bothered by the grotesque aftermath of the crime scenes, making her once again feel separated from reality. She really seems to throw herself full force into her career and seems almost obsessed with finding Longlegs, even falling asleep while looking at the evidence. She also seems to remember numbers and details right off the top of her head. Overall, Detective Harker is a plot driver. She's the engine of the story. She keeps the plot moving and moves the story forward. She's a great detective and not much else. And like all people who throw themselves into their career, their relationships suffer. And unfortunately, the relationship that suffers the most is her relationship with the audience. She has the personality of one of Longlegs' dolls, and it makes her character somewhat boring and unlikable. We really don't care what happens to her character. On the Blackphone, we feel for Finney. He's a normal 13-year-old boy who plays baseball and watches horror movies while his drunk father's passed out on the couch. This makes him relatable, and his character grows in the film and evolves. We want to see him escape the grabber and reunite with his sister. Now both these protagonists might be psychic, but we don't have to be to know who won this round. The winner of round 1 is the Blackphone.
Man, your arm is mint.
Round 2, the plot. Now both of these films were written by sons of horror legends, and both films have underlying themes that reflect on the writers' childhoods. The Blackphone is about 13-year-old Finney Blake being abducted by a serial killer called the Grabber. The film plays out like your basic killer abduction story, except there's a twist. This is where the Blackphone differs from other abduction films. Usually it's the serial killer with a supernatural ability, but it's learned pretty quick that Finney is able to communicate with the dead victims of the Grabber. It's an interesting change that really adds a cool twist to the movie. The movie jumps back and forth between Finney and his sister Gwen, who's also using her psychic abilities to find her brother, adding some cool dream sequences to the movie. The plot of the movie was based off a short story written by Joe Hill, whose real name is Joseph King. Yes, he is the son of possibly the greatest horror writer of all time, Stephen King. And while Joe Hill may have changed his name and probably tries to differentiate himself from his father, the similarities are still there. This movie really feels like a Stephen King story, from the central characters being children like in It and Stand By Me, to the use of psychic abilities like in Dr. Sleep and The Dead Zone. And even in the original short story, the killer is not a magician, but a clown, proving the old saying true: there is no such thing as a king without his clown. Just like his father, Hill's stories aren't just about the psychopaths and the monsters in the dark. They're also about the real-life people affected by them. The beginning of the Blackphone really dives deep into Finney's childhood trauma, like the loss of his mother and being raised by a single parent, and that parent being his alcoholic father, which may have been pulled from Hill's own childhood, with it being well known that Stephen King suffered from substance abuse early in his career, and was something he even featured in many of his own novels like The Shining. It does a really good job of giving its characters life. Even the Grabber's former victims are more than just a name. They are given backstories and shown with their families. It gives the victims more substance. However, while most of the side characters add something to the plot, there is one side character who just doesn't fit. And that is the Grabber's cokehead brother, Max.
Yes, please. Yes, Denver PD.
You're here for the missing kids.
Yes, sir.
He adds absolutely nothing to the story, He was actually added to the film by the director Scott Derrickson. He added in the scene with Max because he felt the audience needed a break halfway through. But all it does is break the momentum of the movie. It was probably a scene the movie could have done without. But I guess we got a pretty cool death scene out of it. Now while the Blackphone is a kidnapper story with a twist, it's not really the main plot point. This is really a movie about fighting back, something we had touched on in round 1. And boy does it hit you over the head with it. I mean, Finney is told not once but twice, and they use Finney's little sister almost as a contrasting character. She's not afraid to fight back against their alcoholic father. Or the school bullies who are 3 times her size. Overall, the Blackphone is a story that doesn't take chances. It keeps to the basics, but what it does do, it does very well. Now Longlegs is a movie plot that doesn't keep things simple. It's a movie that has some layers to it, and it's one you might have to watch more than once to really peel all the layers back. It was written by ozperkins, who is the son of horror icon Anthony Perkins, the original Norman Bates. The movie is about a serial killer named Longlegs who is somehow convincing fathers to kill their families. And just like the Blackphone, there is a deeper message in the film. This movie is about a mother's love and the sacrifices they make for their children. Ruth gives her own life and possibly her soul to save the life of Lee. This was inspired by Oz Perkins' own mother, who knew that Anthony Perkins, Oz's father, was homosexual, and eventually contracted AIDS. She would stay with him until his death and keep it a secret to protect Anthony and her children, because of the discrimination at the time. Oz Perkins would later say that Longlegs would be the most personal movie he's done to date. The first part of the story feels a lot like Silence of the Lambs, or Seven even. Playing out like a detective story, and after it opens with a bang, it does seem to move a bit slow and methodical, but it drastically evolves into a supernatural horror film, and it really catches you off guard. And once it gets moving, it really sucks you in, to the point of finishing the movie and thinking, what did I just watch? With that being said, there are parts of the story that don't really make sense to me. One being Detective Lee Harker being under the influence of Longlegs, the devil, the entire time. But not once was she used to do something evil. Hell, if anything, she was using her newfound psychic gifts to catch bad guys. One of those bad guys being the very man who was supposedly controlling her. But is that what the devil secretly wanted all along? These are some of the many questions you'll ask yourself after finishing the movie. I guarantee most people after watching this movie hopped on Google and searched for some of the many questions this plot leaves you with. But I do think that's part of the magic of the story. Many unanswered questions, and most of the answers are probably right there in front of you waiting to be discovered on another playthrough. The movie itself is like one of Longlegs' notes, just waiting to be deciphered. The only problem with that is most people aren't going to want to watch this movie again. I feel like Longlegs is a story you will either like or you will hate. And while the Blackphone's plot isn't the most complex, but it's very well written, and there are no questions to be answered after. Oz Perkins may have inherited being a bit of a mama's boy from his father, but it's clear Joe Hill inherited being a great storyteller from his. And that's why the Blackphone takes round 2.
Jesus. It's covered in blood.
Round 3. Scare Factor. The Blackphone is not your traditional horror movie. It's more of a thriller with some horror elements thrown in. The movie focuses more on tension than monsters and jump scares. Child abduction is scary by itself because it's very real, and the way it's done in the film adds to the realism. We don't see the kids get abducted, not until Finney anyway, but we see our victims alone and the next, they are gone. Now usually when there's a supernatural element to a film, it enhances the scares, but in the Blackphone it actually takes it away. I had said in the previous round that Finney's ability gives him the upper hand in the movie, which is a cool twist, but it kind of takes away all the danger. It's hard to build suspense when the victim's one step ahead all the time. Now the phone calls from the other side are creepy, hearing the dead victims talk about what happened to them, and the fact that they can't remember who they are and what their names are makes their deaths a little more terrifying.
Who are you?
I don't remember.
There is one victim's call though that stands above the rest. The scene with Griffin Stagg is in my opinion the scariest part of the movie, and it reminds us that this is indeed a horror film. The scene opens with Finney hearing a noise and holding his flashlight up in the dark to see what it is. And we get a pretty good jump scare here with Griffin Stagg levitating upside down and his throat slit. His blood's dripping on the floor and his body turns as he points to the phone. And when Finney picks it up, the only thing he hears is them whisper,
You don't have much time.
The whole scene is very creepy and unsettling, and it leads into one of the most tension-filled scenes of the film, as Griffin tells Finney that the grabber has fallen asleep upstairs, and gives him the bicycle combination to his lock the grabber has now used for his front door. Now this has been done a million times in movies, but that's because it works. You will be on the edge of your seat the entire time Finney fumbles with the bike lock. Overall, the Blackphone does a good job of being creepy, and has some decent scares. Now Longlegs is a movie that really gets under your skin. From the very start of this movie, I would say you never really feel at ease. Every scene feels like Harker's being watched, and that's because she is. The movie subliminally adds Satan in different scenes throughout the movie, almost like the original Exorcist when Pazuzu would flash on screen. But I think it's done better here. It's a lot more subtle, and is one of the many things you might miss on the first watch. You don't really know where the scares are going to come from in this. First you think it's a serial killer movie, then it's a demonic monster movie, and then finally it's a creepy doll movie. The dolls are something straight out of an Annabelle film. They are made to resemble the child they are meant to possess, which makes them even more creepy. Then the barn sequence where they find the first doll is one of the creepiest scenes of the movie. It's very unnerving, and it ends with a pretty good jump scare. But I think the real scare in this movie comes from the scene with the flashback to the Camera family farm. The whole sequence is like a disturbing dream, with the father decapitating a cow and the mother playing with a knife around her C-section scar. The doll's eyes glowing red under the black veil, and finally we watch the father axe a priest and his wife to death. Overall, Longlegs is a demonic serial killer doll movie, and yeah, it's as creepy as it sounds. Now I would say both these movies are pretty similar in the scare category, as they both lean on atmosphere and tension, but one brings a little more than the other. While the Blackphone has some great tension-filled scenes like Finney's escape, but Longlegs has it through the entire movie, and that's why it's the winner of round 3.
I know you're not afraid of a little bit of dark, because you are the dark.
Round 4, the cinematography. The cinematographer for the Blackphone would be Brett Juckowitz. This would be his first time working with director Scott Derrickson. They would shoot the majority of the movie on digital, except for the dream sequences, in which they would use Super 8 film to give it that gritty feeling. Something Scott Derrickson is known for, also using it in his movie Sinister. They would also use something called lens babies to give a shot a distorted look when Finney's being captured by the grabber. He would also use different color grading techniques to help achieve the colors used in 70s cinema, to help the movie achieve its 1970s setting, which was very important to director Scott Derrickson, as he was trying to capture the feeling of being a boy growing up in the 70s. Juckowitz uses a wide array of shots, from wide shots to close shots, to achieve a certain tone for each scene. He did a really good job of using the camera to capture a character's emotion. A prime example of this would be when Finney's sister Gwen has found out that Finney is being taken by the grabber. She runs out of the door crying and starts to run home, but the shot makes it look like she's running but not moving, and the camera slowly zooms in on her face. It perfectly captures the helplessness of what she's feeling, and like time is frozen still. The movie shots also do well with the visual storytelling, like the shots of the grabber standing in the basement doorway, telling us, the viewers, and Finney that the only way out would be through him. Juckowitz would also use shots to achieve tension, one of these shots being a great over-the-shoulder shot of Finney when he's trying to escape, showing us the grabber sleeping in his chair. It really helps add to the suspense of the scene. Overall, the movie had some great cinematography, really capturing certain emotions of the actors and also helping build some tension and suspense. Now in Longlegs, the cinematographer would be Andres Arochi. He would shoot the movie using digital, but would change to a 35mm film and change the aspect ratio to a narrower 4:3 when shooting all the scenes set in the 70s. This helped make the scenes a little more creepy, and using it to hide Longlegs' face in some scenes. This was the decision of ozperkins to keep the audience off balance, which he perfectly achieves. Orochi would shoot most of the film in wide shots to convey more open space in each scene. He did this to make the audience uncomfortable, and he would say in an interview, "I always wanted to leave blank space in the frame. Because for me, fear lives behind your back. It's not in front of you. If you're working on the computer at 1 a.m. and you feel something, it's always behind you." So it was this idea of always having space for fear to live. A scene that conveys this perfectly is the scene with Agent Harker at home, sitting at her desk. Orochi purposely leaves the doorway to the room in the frame. It makes you feel like something or someone is going to walk through the doorway, and adds tension and fear to a scene that would not be scary otherwise. He would also achieve this by putting B-roll shots and scenes to help build the atmosphere, or even lingering on a shot when the actors or actresses have left the scene. A great example of this would be the barn scene, when Detective Harker enters the barn and walks out of frame, but the shot stays focused on the doorway, keeping the viewer face to face with the vast outside, and the camera slowly zooms in. Is there someone following them? Is there something out there? These are questions that these shots make you ask yourself. Longlegs would also use the camera to capture what our characters are feeling. In this scene where Lee Harker has been freed from the doll, she wakes up in the basement, and the shot is flipped upside down, making us the audience understand how Harker's feeling in that exact moment. The movie also would color grade their scenes, with a lot of the shots having a red tint to them. This could be to symbolize Harker being under the influence of the devil. Both films had honestly some amazing cinematography, and it's easy to see how both directors are very much visual storytellers. However, one film really used its cinematography to induce fear. While the Blackphone used shots to really capture the emotions of the characters, and had some good shots to build tension, Longlegs and its wide shots really helped create fear in almost every scene. The Blackphone had me on the edge of my seat, while Longlegs had me looking around the living room. And that's why Longlegs is the winner of round 4.
Oh, there she is.
Round 5. The music and score. Blackphone's score would be done by Mark Corbin, the man behind Robert Eger's The Witch and The Lighthouse. Corbin is known for his creepy scores, but he's also very well known for creating an instrument to do just that very thing. He created something called the Apprehension Engine, which is basically a box with different instruments attached. Things like metal rods and rulers, strings, and a reverb tank. It's played with something called an E-bow, which is basically an electronic bow that vibrates on the string. This should tell you a lot about Corbin's style, as he doesn't really rely too much musically as much as using weird and disturbing sounds to really build the atmosphere. This score does a really good job of doing just that. He would use a lot of static and weird noises in his score. One of those noises sounding almost like someone using an old rotary phone, giving off a shuddering sound. For the grabber scene, he would use something called friction mallets, which are used to rub on different things to give different eerie sounds from the friction. Although the film takes place in the 1970s, he would rely more on the emotional side of the characters than the period or setting for his score. He would say in an interview, "I really didn't want to reflect too much with the period and setting, but rather really play to the characters." While the score would stay clear of its 70s setting, the music would not, going with songs like Fox on the Run by Sweet and Free Ride by the Edgar Winter Group. These songs would help build the 1970s theme of the film. The sound design would also mimic the music. Sound editor supervisor Paul Heckner would state in an interview, "Part of what we really wanted out of this film was to keep the 70s vibe. That was exemplified in some of the music that was used, like Pink Floyd. The sound design needed to, in a way, echo that." Overall, the music and score for the Blackphone would set the dark, spooky atmosphere with Mark Corbin's score, and help add to that 1970s aesthetic with the music and sound design. Now, Longlegs' score would be done by Elvis Perkins, the brother of director Oz Perkins. He would do the score for the film under the pseudonym Zogi. And just like Corbin in the Blackphone, his score would really help set the tone of the movie. Their styles are actually pretty similar, with both using weird sounds and effects that make a chilling atmosphere. But while Corbin would use more friction-based sounds, Elvis would use more of an instrumental, using drums and pianos, even some electric guitar. Oz Perkins would say he wanted the movie to be about rock and roll and mothers. Elvis would work closely with the sound designer, Eugenio Bagaglia, who would also incorporate some interesting noises into the film. Oz Perkins had told Bagaglia that he wanted it to feel like something was being transmitted or projected onto the audience's brain, similar to what was happening to Lee Harker in the movie. He would achieve this by using a 360-degree mic and rubbing the windscreen, making a crackling sound like an old 70s record player. He would also leave subliminal messages throughout the film, whispering sinister things and then playing it in reverse, and using it over the disturbing images that flash on the screen. He would also go as far as looking up the best way to summon a demon, which he found out to be reciting the Lord's Prayer backwards, which he would then proceed to do with a priest, and put it in the film when Harker's reviewing the Longlegs files. So if you decided to watch this with a group of friends at your uncle's cabin, you better get that chainsaw ready. Another cool effect is something he would call the Hell Heartbeat, which is the sound that pulsates throughout the movie like it's calling out to Lee. He recorded the noise by simply walking up and down the stairs at his house and playing it in reverse. Speaking of heartbeats, the scene where Harker meets Longlegs in the interview room is the first time Maika Monroe would see Nicolas Cage in his full makeup. They used the actual sound of her heartbeat for the scene. While the score and sounds in the film add to the ambiance of the movie, it's the music that would actually inspire it. Ozperkins would say that the band T-Rex served as a major inspiration for the film. 2 of their songs would be featured in the movie, Diamonds and Get It On, Bang a Gong. Bang a Gong's lyrics would even be used as a quote in the beginning of the movie, and it would also play at the end during the credits. The sound department would even use gongs throughout the movie to pay tribute to the band. Now, while the Blackphone's music and score would really help build up the creepy and dark atmosphere, Longlegs' music was an inspiration to the film, and the score's subliminal messages had us under its spell, and not to mention summoning real-life demons. And that's why Longlegs is the winner of round 5.
I'll be a little bit of everywhere.
Round 6, The Killers. In the Blackphone, our serial killer is the Grabber. And in the original short story, he was a clown like William H. Gacy, the notorious serial killer. But in the movie, he's a magician who uses magic tricks and black balloons to lure kids into his creepy black van. The Grabber would be played by Ethan Hawke, who didn't want to play the part at first because he wasn't crazy about playing villains. But after reading the script, he fell in love with the story. Hawke gives a real creepy performance, and it was actually his voice that made Scott Derrickson want to cast him in the role.
Jesus. It's covered in blood. It's like I killed someone.
Derrickson would tell The Hollywood Reporter the first thing was Ethan's voice. I think that a lot of actors have voices that are not in and of themselves highly memorable. His voice is really distinctive. His voice doesn't sound like anybody else's, and it has a high register that he can speak with very easily and a low register that he can speak with very easily. Derrickson was right. The way Hawke delivers the lines really is chilling. One second he speaks in a high, almost childlike or nurturing tone.
But I'm not gonna hold it against you. I guess. Now we're even.
And the next he's talking like a sadistic murderer.
With the door shut, no one can hear anything down here. I soundproofed it myself.
Now, while the Grabber's voice and Hawke's performance are truly great, it's the mask that has truly become iconic.
This face?
Derrickson knew the mask would be the way to sell the film, so he wanted to create something to rival such movies that came before it, like Halloween or Friday the 13th. His original idea was to have 2 leather masks, one with a smile and one with a frown. But he also didn't want to hide Ethan Hawke's face, so he came up with the idea of there being 3 masks, one with a smile, one with a frown, and one with no smile. And all 3 being able to split in half so the Grabber could wear different expressions to convey different emotions. The mask itself was inspired by The Man That Smiles, the old black and white film. Derrickson would send the information out to different special effects companies, but at the end of the day, it was the great Tom Savini's company who would end up creating this iconic mask. Now, not much is known about the Grabber's backstory, and this was also a decision by director Scott Derrickson, who thought the unknown was much scarier. But there are still some pieces of this movie for us to formulate our own theory. One being the game he plays with his victims called Naughty Boy, where he purposely leaves the basement door unlocked hoping the victim will try and escape, where he patiently waits for them in the kitchen with a belt. The name itself makes it seem like maybe it was something he was called when he was younger, and he was maybe abused or even beaten. Ethan Hawke even thought of the character as a broken, deeply ashamed, wounded animal, which also adds to the theory that something probably happened to him in his childhood. This could be why he abducts children and only kills them after they play the naughty boy game.
Why hasn't he killed me?
You won't play the game. You have to play the game. If you don't play, he can't win.
What game?
Naughty boy.
As he sees the kids as the naughty version of himself and tries to kill it off. Or maybe he's just a psycho in a mask who enjoys killing children. Either way, he's a great horror villain and one who will not easily be forgotten. In Longlegs, our serial killer is Dale Cobble, who goes under the creepy and illustrious name of Longlegs. He's a doll maker who makes dolls who look like his victims and puts metal balls infused with the man downstairs inside the dolls. This causes the families they're given to go crazy. Longlegs would be based off different real-life serial killers like Charles Manson and the Zodiac Killer. Now, to pull the character of Longlegs off, Ozperkins would have to go with an actor who could pull off the craziness of Longlegs, someone a bit unhinged. But where would he find an actor like that? Yes, no greater actor at playing an absolute nutjob than Nicolas Cage. Surprisingly enough, this is Cage's first time playing a serial killer, and it honestly seems like a role he was destined to play. Cage is magnetic when he's on the screen, and while his performance almost comes off comical, it's also incredibly creepy.
Knock, knock on the farmhouse door. A nice lady with a Bible and a congratulations, you have been selected. You may now collect your gift from the church.
He would base a lot of Longlegs' mannerisms off his own mother, who suffered from mental illness, including severe depression and schizophrenia. She would even be institutionalized for several years when Cage was younger. From the strange hand movements to the almost high-pitched childlike voice.
Oh, there she is.
One of these mannerisms would make for a very memorable scene. When Cage was a child, his mother would make cuckoo clock noises to him, and Cage would end up using this in the movie with the scene with the young hardware store clerk.
Cuckoo, 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 cuckoo.
The makeup applied to Cage would take 2.5 hours, and the result would make Cage unrecognizable. Perkins wanted him to look like he had a botched plastic surgery. This is also why he wore the white powder on his face to cover up the scars. It was also important for Nicolas Cage that the character come off androgynous. There's not much to Longlegs' backstory, but we do know from Ozperkins that he is an ex-glam rocker. He had been doing something in his life before the devil made him trade in his guitar for his doll making skills. Perkins would also say that he is not an evil character, but a sympathetic one. He didn't seek to do evil or murder, but was compelled to. Perkins would say a guy whose face has bad plastic surgery and white face makeup, that felt really scary to me. And it also felt sad to me, which was important. He's not the Hydra. He's a person who was presumably doing something else in his life before the devil tapped him on his shoulder and said, "It's time. You are now my secretary." Now, one interesting theory is that Longlegs is none other than Mark Bolan, the lead singer of T-Rex. T-Rex heavily inspired this movie and are even quoted at the beginning of the film, and one of their songs even plays at the end. Mark Bolan even looks eerily similar to Longlegs. He would also die in a car crash at a young age, but what if he didn't? This could explain his need for the plastic surgery and also explain why his character is always singing.
Let me in now, and it can be nice. Make me go now, and I'll have to come back. Not once, not twice, but as many times as I like.
Or maybe he's just a huge T-Rex fan. Either way, Cage is absolutely creepy and unsettling as Longlegs. Now, two well-known actors and two very great performances. Ethan Hawke killed as the Grabber from his creepy, almost split personality with his different voices and the amazing mask that Tom Savini created. But without his mask, he was just a creepy magician who played his last trick on the wrong kid. Longlegs didn't need a mask to be creepy. Everything about him was disturbing, from his voice to his mannerisms to his almost doll-like appearance. And while the Grabber's last breath was him gargling his own spit while a bunch of kids roasted him over his own phone line, Longlegs' plan went accordingly. And he went out on his own terms, and he went out with a bang. And that's why the winner of round 6 is Longlegs.
Hail Satan.
Round 7. The ending. The Blackphone ticks a lot of boxes with its ending. Finney has finally played the naughty boy game, and the grabber plans to kill Finney. We finally see our hero break down for the first time. Luckily, he gets a call from his old friend Robin, who gives him a bit of a pep talk and then shows him how to use the phone like Russell Crowe would. Meanwhile, Finney's sister Gwen discovers the home of the grabber in a dream and calls Starsky and Hutch for help. Back at the house, our hero of the film, Max, sobers up long enough to realize that his brother sitting in the kitchen half naked with a devil mask on every night is a little strange. Max finds Finney in the basement only long enough to be axed from the movie by the grabber.
No, don't worry about it. We can talk about this.
Now Finney takes on the grabber and quickly takes him out with the old giant hole under the rug trick. Gwen and the police arrive to the house and surprise, it's the wrong house. Or is it? The big twist, the grabber owns 2 houses and this is where he buries their bodies. Finney now beats the grabber with the phone before strangling him with the phone wire. And now the grabber has to listen to all his victims taunt him.
Welcome to the nightmare end of your pathetic little life.
You don't have much time.
Today's the day, motherfucker.
I can't kill you, hijo de puta. So Finn is gonna do it for me.
Finn's arm is mint.
Finney then walks out of the house and is reunited with his sister Gwen. And we get a horror film with an actual happy ending. The grabber is dead and Finney and Gwen live happily ever after with their father who probably quit drinking.
Hello, Finney.
Well, maybe not a happy ending after all. Overall, the ending of the Blackphone ties up all the loose ends. And I do like how all the victims' plans are used to help Finney beat the grabber at the end. The wire in the wall, the hole in the floor, the telequando, the meat in the freezer, and the bike lock to get out. I also like how the grabber finally gets to hear all his victims through the phone before he dies. The original idea was to have the grabber see all his victims' ghosts, but I do think incorporating the phone was a better idea. The grabber also freaking out when his mask was pulled off was the idea of Ethan Hawke, as he felt like the grabber uses the mask to hide his shame. This is why when it's removed, he quickly tries to hide his face. Now the ending kind of intertwines 3 different stories. You have Finney deciding to fight back, Gwen working with the police, and Max trying to figure out who the grabber is. The problem is 2 of these conclusions kind of fizzle out, which leads to my biggest problem with the ending, which is really the lack of suspense. Now I understand you had to give Gwen something to do at the end of the movie, but the 2 houses twist was kind of anticlimactic. We knew when they were going through the house that it wasn't going to be the right house, and she really didn't help Finney in any way. And maybe if they would have hinted at it a little earlier in the movie, it would have came across a little better. Also, Max being killed off pretty quickly felt like a loose end they had to tie up. Finally, the fight between the grabber and Finney really had 0 tension. Not once did I feel like Finney was in trouble. Now maybe the movie would have been better if the grabber got the upper hand somehow, and the cops busted in just in time to save Finney. Overall though, the ending tied up all the loose ends and it was a good ending to a solid film. And Longlegs Harker finally figures out who Longlegs is by an old picture in her room. Dale Cobble turns himself in and they bring him in for questioning, but surprise surprise, he'll only talk to Lee. The interrogation scene is honestly one of the best parts of the film. Cage dials it up to 11 as Longlegs, and in Longlegs fashion, he says a lot without saying much.
Down. Now all the way down. And get right down to the dirty, dirty work. Work that gets dirty as it cleans. Like a mop.
But in so many words, he reveals Lee's mother Ruth as his accomplice, before politely pleading the fifth.
Hail Satan.
Lee and Agent Brown down and go to confront Lee's mom. While Lee checks inside, Ruth blows away Agent Browning, not once, but twice. We also get our reveal that Lee has been under the control of Longlegs, explaining her strangeness and psychic abilities. Her mother shoots the doll, freeing Lee. We then get our flashback of what happened when Lee was a little girl. Ruth was given a choice to save Lee, so she decided to help Longlegs murder families to spare Lee's life. Lee wakes up in the basement to a phone ringing. The demonic voice on the phone tells Lee she's late to Miss Ruby's birthday party.
You're late for Miss Ruby's birthday party.
On the way there, Lee has a chance to catch her breath and process what just happened. Agent Carter and his wife let Lee inside. Ruth is sitting on a chair across from Ruby and her new demon doll. It appears that Carter and his family are already under the doll's spell, as Lee's words fall on deaf ears. Carter then cuts a cake and then cuts his wife before Lee shoots him dead.
Carter, stop!
Lee's mom, possessed by the devil, tries to kill Lee before being shot.
Don't come in!
Now our movie full of questions ends on a question, as Lee tries to shoot the doll, but the gun won't shoot. The film then closes on Longlegs singing Happy Birthday and ends with a Hail Satan.
Hail Satan! Hail Satan! Wait, what?
The ending of Longlegs has a lot of things to like. It really does a good job of building tension, and it feels like a true climax to a movie. Also, many twists, but some less obvious than others. Longlegs smashing his head against the table I did not see coming. Ozperkins would say the movie was inspired by the 90s detective stories like Silence of the Lambs and Seven. And this ending felt a lot like Seven's ending, with our killer turning himself in and his true objective being completed, and that being Lee killing her mother. The problem I have with Longlegs is the same problem I have with the film's plot: unanswered questions. Lee trying to shoot the doll at the end of the film is one of these questions. Was Lee possessed still? The ending is ambiguous, and it's unknown if Lee is now the new Longlegs or if she simply leaves with Ruby. Either way, it's a tragic ending. My personal opinion is that the doll symbolizes evil itself, and Lee not being able to shoot it is because evil can never die. The devil has made Lee kill her own mother, which is what he wanted all along. Lee Harker's life is ruined, and that's why the movie ends with a good old Hail Satan, because the devil is won. Now both endings have their faults. The Blackphone ties up all the loose ends and feels like a true conclusion to the story, but it lacks any suspense. And the film feels kind of almost like it fizzles out. While Longlegs really feels like a climax to a movie, adding tension and twists along the way, but while it answers some question, it ends on another, and leaves the film open to interpretation. For me, the winner of round 7 really comes down to closure versus climax. But at the end of the day, to me, closure is the more important thing for a film. We could have a movie that's a thrill ride, but if there's no closure, we feel unfulfilled. Just look at the classic TV show, The Sopranos. One of the greatest shows in television history, and what do we remember? Yeah, that awful, ambiguous ending. Now, in no way is Longlegs' ending as bad as The Sopranos, but it still has us asking why. There is still some tension in the Blackphone's ending, but more importantly, it leaves us fulfilled. And that's why it's the winner of round 7.
I want this to really hurt.
So the winner of this movie matchup is Longlegs.
Hail Satan!
Blackphone really fleshes out its main characters, focusing on our lead character and their family drama as much as the serial killer. And Ethan Hawke gives a chilling performance as the grabber, but it's hard to out-crazy the cage. Longlegs is a movie that makes you ask questions, but it's also a movie that sticks to you. It will affect you whether you like it or not. The cinematography and score makes you uncomfortable from start to finish, and Cage's performance has you mesmerized like he's made a doll just for you. The Blackphone is a good movie, but Longlegs just very well may be a cult classic, and that's why it's the winner of this movie matchup. And if you think The Blackphone is a better film,
Cuckoo, 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 cuckoo.
thank you for watching this episode of the Movie Matchup. If you like what you see, like and subscribe, and stay tuned for more movie matchups.